The room fell silent when she stepped down from the dusty carriage, her hands trembling as she clutched a worn carpetbag against her chest. She had traveled miles across barren lands, her heart filled with hope and fear, yet when her boots touched the wooden planks of the small frontier town, every pair of eyes turned away. No welcoming smiles, no outstretched hands, just whispers, sidelong glances, and the heavy ache of rejection. The mail-order bride thought no one wanted her, the narrator's voice echoes, until a little girl whispered the words that would change everything. "Can you be my mommy?" Her name was Eliza Monroe, a woman of 27 with a past that clung to her like shadows at twilight. She had been raised in an orphanage back east, passed over time and again by families who chose younger, prettier girls. The scars of abandonment had carved themselves deep into her heart. When she turned 25, she became a governess, tending to other people's children with the tenderness she had always longed for herself. But deep down, she knew she was unwanted until one day, she saw an advertisement in the back of a paper, "Frontier Men Seeking Wives. Letters Welcomed." It felt foolish, desperate even, but she wrote. Weeks later, a letter arrived from a widowed rancher in Montana. His words were plain and practical. He needed a woman's hand in the home and a mother for his daughter. Hope sparked in her chest. Perhaps, at last, she could belong. The journey west was grueling. Days on rattling trains, nights in cramped stagecoaches, and the gnawing fear that the man she was traveling to meet might change his mind when he saw her. She rehearsed greetings, practiced smiles in the frost-blurred windows, and prayed that she would not be turned away. Yet when she arrived, the man who had written her, Thomas Harding, stood tall and broad-shouldered at the edge of the station, his eyes carrying a storm. He did not smile. He barely nodded. Behind him, holding his large calloused hand, was a little girl with fiery curls and eyes the color of the summer sky. Eliza's heart lifted at the sight of the child, but when she stepped forward, Thomas's words struck like ice. "You're older than I expected," he muttered under his breath, his jaw tight. The townsfolk who had gathered nearby whispered, their disapproval palpable. Eliza felt her cheeks burn. She wanted to sink into the ground. This was supposed to be her new beginning, but in that moment, it felt like another rejection written in the story of her life. Thomas led her toward the wagon without warmth, and the silence between them was heavier than the bags she carried. The ranch was vast but lonely. Eliza tried to busy herself with small tasks, mending curtains, tending the kitchen garden, helping in the stables, but Thomas kept his distance, as though she were nothing more than a hired hand. It was his daughter, Clara, who watched her most closely. Clara rarely spoke, shy and withdrawn after losing her mother 2 years before. At night, Eliza would hear the girl crying softly in her small upstairs room, and her own heart broke with every muffled sob. She longed to comfort her but feared overstepping invisible boundaries. One chilly evening, after a long day of chores, Eliza sat by the fire sewing a tear in her dress. She didn't notice Clara approach until the little girl tugged gently at her sleeve. Eliza looked up into those wide blue eyes, filled with uncertainty. The child's lips trembled as she whispered, can you be my mommy?" Tears blurred Eliza's vision instantly. It was the first time anyone had ever asked her to belong. She pulled Clara into her arms, holding her close as though she were holding her own broken heart together. In that moment, it no longer mattered what Thomas thought. She had been chosen, not by a man seeking convenience, but by a child yearning for love. Over the following weeks, Clara clung to Eliza more and more. She followed her in the garden, helped her knead bread, and fell asleep in her lap during quiet evenings. Slowly, Thomas began to notice the bond forming between them. He saw how Clara's laughter returned, how the shadows of grief lifted from her eyes. Yet, despite witnessing this, he remained guarded. He feared loving again, feared losing again. His wife's death had left scars deeper than he admitted, and part of him resented Eliza for stepping into the place his late wife once held. The tension between them grew until one harsh winter night when Clara fell ill. A fever raged through her small body, and the doctor warned that she might not survive the night. Thomas was beside himself, pacing the room, muttering prayers he had long forgotten. Eliza, however, remained steadfast. She bathed Clara's forehead, held her hand, and sang lullabies in a soft trembling voice, refusing to let go. Hour after hour she kept vigil, her own tears falling quietly. By dawn, Clara's fever broke. She opened her eyes weakly and whispered, "Mommy," before drifting back into sleep. Thomas's head snapped toward Eliza, his eyes wide with something between shock and gratitude. For the first time, he truly saw her not as a stranger or an obligation, but as the woman who had breathed life back into his child's heart. That morning, Thomas sat at the edge of the bed and whispered, "I was wrong about you. Clara needs you. I think, maybe I do too." His voice cracked, and Eliza realized his silence had never been about her, but about the pain he carried inside. Seasons passed, and the ranch blossomed with warmth it had not known since before grief hollowed it out. Eliza became not just a caretaker, but the heart of the home. She taught Clara how to sew, read to her by lamplight, and walked hand in hand through the fields of wildflowers. Slowly, she and Thomas grew closer, the unspoken affection between them finally blooming into love as natural as spring after a harsh winter. Years later, as Eliza stood on the porch watching Clara chase butterflies in the tall grass, she realized something extraordinary. She had spent her life believing she was unwanted, unworthy, invisible. But here, in the embrace of a child's whisper, she had discovered the truth: she was more than wanted, she was needed. And in giving her love freely, she had found a family, a purpose, and a home that was finally her own. The narrator's voice closes gently. Sometimes, it isn't the love of a man that saves us, but the love of a child who sees in us what we could never see in ourselves. Eliza thought no one wanted her, until a little girl's whisper reminded her that the greatest gift is not to be chosen, but to choose to love.